There are certain things that become surprisingly important after 50 that absolutely would not have mattered before. And honestly, nobody really warned you about it. Welcome. Come on in, get comfy, and let's sit for a while. Because today we need to talk about the strange little ways life changes that somehow sneak up on you. Because at some point, without fully noticing when it happened, you stop caring about certain things and become deeply invested in completely different ones. For example, comfortable shoes. There was a time when style came first. You suffered for fashion. You wore things that looked good despite the fact they felt medically concerning. Now, if a shoe even hints at discomfort, it's over. You'll walk straight out of the shop. Because peace matters now. Arch support matters now. And honestly, a good sole can improve your entire mood. And then there's room temperature. This suddenly becomes extremely important. Too cold? Unacceptable. Too warm? Also unacceptable. You become strangely aware of drafts. You say things like, "Ooh, there's a bit of a breeze in here," which is exactly the kind of sentence you never imagined saying in your younger years. And noise. Your relationship with noise changes completely. Loud restaurants? Absolutely exhausting. Background music that's too loud? Why? What are we all shouting over? At some point, peace and quiet stops feeling boring and starts feeling luxurious. And perhaps one of the strangest changes of all, the genuine relief when plans get cancelled. In your younger years, cancelling plans felt disappointing. Now, sometimes they feel like a gift from the universe. Suddenly, you've got an unexpected evening at home. No travelling, no parking, no deciding what to wear. Just calm. Beautiful, beautiful calm. And then there's the deeply unexpected excitement of household purchases. A good vacuum cleaner, a new frying pan, storage containers that stack properly. At some point, these things stop sounding dull and start sounding genuinely thrilling. And honestly, a well-organised cupboard can bring an unreasonable amount of satisfaction. And somewhere in all these small changes, you start to realise something. Life hasn't necessarily become smaller. You've just become more aware of what actually makes daily life feel good. Because this only gets more familiar. And then there comes a point where comfort quietly becomes one of your highest priorities. Not excitement, not chaos, comfort. For example, going out. This used to feel spontaneous. Now it requires planning. Not dramatic planning, just awareness. What time does it start? How long will it go on for? Is there parking nearby? Will there be seating? These things matter now. And perhaps most importantly, how late will I realistically be home? Because at some point, being out past a certain hour starts to feel less like fun and more like a personal attack. And even enjoyable plans now require recovery time afterwards. You go out for one evening and the next day becomes a gentle rehabilitation programme. Tea, silence, possibly sitting down for longer than necessary. And honestly, you're completely fine with that. And then there's seating. You become incredibly aware of chairs. A bad chair can ruin an entire experience now. You sit down somewhere uncomfortable and immediately start calculating, how long will I realistically survive this? Meanwhile, a genuinely comfortable chair, that becomes an emotional experience. At some point, you stop complimenting people's decorations and start complimenting lumbar support. And then there are routines. Younger you probably imagined that getting older would mean becoming more spontaneous. In reality, you become strangely protective of very specific routines. You like knowing where things are, what's happening, what time things begin, and ideally, what time they end. Unexpected changes become far less exciting. And another thing nobody warns you about, supermarkets suddenly become far too intense. The lighting, the music, the people standing in confusing places with trolleys. Why is everything so bright? Why is there music playing near the potatoes? And why does one person always stop directly in the middle of the aisle? And perhaps one of the greatest freedoms after 50 is finally understanding that you can just leave things early. You don't have to stay to the end. You don't have to pretend you're still enjoying yourself. You can simply say, well, I might make a move, which is one of the most powerful adult phrases ever created. And somewhere in all these little changes, you realise something strangely comforting. A lot of getting older is simply becoming more honest about what actually makes you comfortable. And honestly, that's probably a good thing. And when you really look at all these changes, the comfortable shoes, the quiet evenings, the emotional attachment to supportive chairs, it's easy to laugh about it. Because honestly, some of it is slightly ridiculous. But underneath all the humour, there's something else happening too. Because somewhere along the way, your priorities begin to shift. Not dramatically, just gradually. The things that once felt important start mattering a little less. And the things that once seemed boring suddenly feel surprisingly valuable. Peace, comfort, calm, a quiet morning, getting home early, finding a parking space immediately. At some point, these become genuine sources of happiness. And honestly, that's quite lovely. Because maybe part of getting older is finally realising that a good life isn't always built from big moments. Sometimes it's a cup of tea at the right time, a quiet house, fresh bed sheets, a comfortable chair, and plans that finish before it gets too late. And somehow, those things start feeling richer than they used to. And perhaps another thing changes too. You stop performing quite so much. You stop pretending to enjoy things that exhaust you. You stop forcing yourself into uncomfortable situations just because you think you should. And there's something very freeing about that. Because after a certain point, peace becomes more important than proving something. And maybe that's the real shift underneath all this. You begin to know yourself better. What drains you, what restores you, what genuinely makes your days feel nicer, and what quietly makes them harder. And instead of ignoring those things, you start listening to them. Not dramatically, just honestly. And perhaps that's why so many people after 50 share the same strange little habits. The excitement over practical purchases, the relief when plans get cancelled, the obsession with comfortable seating, because deep down we've all quietly realised something important. Comfort is underrated, massively underrated. And maybe getting older isn't really about becoming old at all. Maybe it's about becoming a little more aware of what actually matters. And often it turns out to be much simpler than we once imagined. And perhaps the next time you feel deeply excited about something wonderfully practical, you won't judge yourself too harshly. Because honestly, a good frying pan, a quiet evening, and a chair that supports your back properly can genuinely improve your quality of life. And at this stage, that feels like wisdom. I'd love to ask, what has become weirdly important to you after 50? Thank you for sharing your time with me today. Take gentle care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.